Thanks very much, Greg, and thanks for the CAA for allowing me to talk today, and also to Ambulance Victoria for supporting me in being here today. So over the next 20 minutes or so, I'm going to have a chat to you about what we've been doing in Victoria for probably the better part of the last 20 years in response to Step 6 of the GRA, and that's having an AED program with our community responders, and primarily my focus will be on the fire services. So just to set the scene a little bit, so Victoria, it's a population of just over 6 million people. As an ambulance service, we have about just under 4,500 paramedics, and that's a two-tier paramedic model of ALS, Advanced Life Support, and intensive care paramedics. And we also have 1,000 first responders, either 100% volunteer or we also operate a retained model. Our ambulance service covers 4.5 million people live in the metropolitan Melbourne. We cover 240,000 square kilometres, and throughout the course of a year, 1 in 6 people living in Victoria will call an ambulance or an emergency ambulance. We actually have 3 fire services. We have the Metropolitan Fire Brigade, made up of 52 fire stations that covers the metropolitan Melbourne, and they cover 1,000 square kilometres right in the heart of Victoria. We have the Country Fire Authority, and again, staff-wise or career firefighter-wise, both organisations are about the same, 2,000, 2,500 firefighters. CFA covers essentially the remainder of Victoria, along with Forest Fire Victoria, and has 45,000 volunteer firefighters. Now, our partnership as Ambulance Victoria and with our medical first response program is primarily, or it is with the Metropolitan Fire Brigade and the CFA. Now, this will be going over some old ground for some of you, but within Victoria, just over 6,000 cardiac arrests, out of hospital cardiac arrests per year over the 16-17 year, and this has come out of our VACAR report that Karen Smith and her amazing team put together. That comprises 65% male, 36% female, only 15%, and this is what we spoke about earlier in the week for those in the RA, only 15% in the public space, but 76% within people's private homes, and that's where we're sending our firefighters and our paramedics. We spoke a little bit about telephone triage, and our latest figures show that 86% of cardiac arrests are correctly identified at the time of call. Now, that's quite significant for the model with our firefighter first responders, in that it means that not only do we get an ambulance going a lot sooner, and the correct ambulance response, so the ALS and the intensive care model, but we're also able to send our co-responders, in this case our fire brigades. EMR program, as I said, approaching 20 years this year, and it started back in 1995 with a call to action where at that time in Victoria we had 3 ambulance services, and there was a review done by Professor Steve Bernard on cardiac arrest within metropolitan Melbourne, where there was established that there's a high proportion of shockable rhythms but slow response times at that time. There's 361 cases reviewed that were identified as a presumed cardiac cause, with 113 of them in a shockable rhythm upon arrival of ambulance services. So that got some of the very smart minds that we were lucky to have in Victoria thinking, and in 1998 there was a successful trial conducted within metropolitan Melbourne with I think it was about 10 fire stations within the MFB, where there was a prospective controlled trial undertaken. There was 268 cases within the control, or cardiac arrests attended, 161 of them within the pilot, that is with ambulance and MFB responding. And what we saw there was a reduced response time of over 2 minutes to each of those cases from what the fire brigades were able to provide. That sounds good. Response time is also important, absolutely. But what it also meant for those patients is, given that the firefighters were trained in CPR and AED, is they were being defibrillated on average about 2 minutes quicker. We moved forward to 2000, and on the back of that successful trial, the program was rolled out to all 52 fire stations within the MFB. And that saw, as I said, an AED, an oxygen resuscitation kit, a first aid kit put on every fire truck. So that's about, essentially for cardiac arrest, it increased within metropolitan Melbourne our response by about 100 vehicles or 100 response units within the state, or within metropolitan Melbourne. Some years after, and after a lot of discussion, there was a trial conducted within the Country Fire Authority, and there was 5 pure volunteer fire brigades that started that in 2007, and then a couple of years later there was a 5 integrated, so that is a career firefighter and a volunteer integration model within the fire stations. And it was found that throughout that trial, or throughout that pilot program, that patients who were defibrillated by CFA were twice as likely, patients attended by them were found to be twice as likely to be defibrillated than those in a lot shorter time than ambulance alone. 2015, we've expanded that rollout to all 38 integrated fire stations across the state of Victoria, primarily in the outer metro area of Melbourne, and also in our major rural cities around the state. The qualification that the firefighters obtain is a Victorian Training Authority qualification, and it's delivered over an 8-day face-to-face program, either delivered by a third party, this being Monash University, or by Ambulance Victoria and within our team. And what we see as a result of that is fire services are co-responded simultaneously, and this is one of the good things about having our dispatch system in the same building and using the same systems. They corresponded exactly at the same time as ambulance to 28 of those AMPDS priority 0 case types. So as I said, the partnership's been a long-standing one. It's 20 years formally within the Medical First Response Program, but obviously we've had, as an ambulance service, much like your own I would imagine, we've had a great relationship with our fire services within the state of Victoria for a lot longer than that. The partnership, so the EMR program is conducted under within a memorandum of understanding that we have signed with each of the fire organisations, and that sets out the roles and the responsibilities of each of the agencies. And it's around, not only the operational things, but information sharing and how we're going to do that around media. And we do conduct a lot of media. There's a lot of interest in this program still after 20 years within Victoria, and also any program changes. What Ambulance brings to this program is a level of clinical governance around it, and that's delivered under the auspices of our Medical Advisory Committee within Ambulance Victoria. And they provide, through that provides oversight of clinical protocols and clinical practices that our firefighters deliver, training and qualification, requalification requirements, operational equipment, and we try to be synergistic between ambulance and fire when it comes to operational equipment. It also sets out the roles and responsibilities and the boundaries of clinical reviews within the program, and clinical debriefs, clinical feedbacks. And we use a regular model of formal meetings where information is fed up to the Medical Advisory Committee, and also out of the Medical Advisory Committee back to the fire services. Each of the agencies has a dedicated department that is solely focused on EMR, on medical first response. So for Ambulance Victoria, as the manager, I'm fortunate enough to have a fantastic team of 3 full-time staff in addition to myself, but we also have a pool of 6 at any one time, 6 sessional paramedic educators, and I'll talk to them a little bit further. What they do is they have a number of roles, I guess, within the fire services. So first and foremost, they debrief and they follow up every single cardiac arrest that our fire service goes to. Now that can range from just a phone call, and we receive all information. That can from a phone call just to see how the crew went. Most of the time, thankfully, the guys are very good, right through to sitting down after hours formal debriefs around absolutely everything. And firefighters, I think, perhaps don't get the credit that they deserve. These guys are very, very passionate about the program. They're very, very knowledgeable about the program. It's quite interesting. We spoke a little bit earlier today about ECMO. I would ask you to go and have a chat to a firefighter about a firefighting pump and see how that relates to ECMO. Very, very similar, and they present that in those terms. So we don't give them enough credit, I think, around the knowledge and the skill that they have. Our paramedic educators also deliver every 32 days a face-to-face 90-minute session of continuing education around topics that we agree between both agencies. All of the outcome data from the fire services response is captured by the VACAR team and is reported on as such. And as I said, after 20 years, there's still a very strong commitment between both of all three of the agencies towards this program. And we talk, you know, the whole focus of these 2 days is about putting the patient first. And that is first and foremost what we do as an ambulance service, but what the fire service is doing within this program. They very, very clearly understand that is about putting the patient first. So the results. I spoke earlier, you know, a 2-minute improvement in response times back in the pilot in 1998, and was continued to see very successful results. The last 5 years, the EMR program has had just under 25,000 responses across the 52 MFB fire brigades and the CFA fire brigades, keeping in mind that it's only over the last couple of years that we've continued to roll that CFA model out. So we would expect that those numbers will increase, as will the results. Just under 40% of those 25,000 responses were confirmed as cardiac arrests, and our 5 first responders are defibrillating for the CFA. Just under 50% of those patients, they're on scene first, and about 45% of the time within Metropolitan Melbourne, keeping in mind that from an ambulance perspective, we have a higher saturation of ambulance resources within that Metropolitan Melbourne area. Defibrillation, as I said, and CPR, fire services on scene. First, 630 for the CFA in an expanding program, and just under 1,600 confirmed arrests where they were first on scene. 32% of the time the MFB are commencing CPR prior to ambulance, 42% of the time for the CFA, and about 10% of the time defibrillation is being delivered prior to ambulance resources on scene in the country areas, and about 6% within Metropolitan Melbourne. This is a slide that you've probably seen a little bit over the last couple of days, but it just points out that the program, so the first responder programs, it definitely does help, and we see 65% of our patients in a shockable rhythm that are attended to by our 5 first responders are surviving the event, and that is they're making it to hospital, and 37% of those patients are being discharged alive back to a normal life, which is absolutely fantastic. And it's only just, it's slightly ahead of an ambulance-only response model, but not quite to the standard of the public AED response model. And that, for our ambulance service and for our people in Victoria, it contributes to that overall. So overall result that ambulance is receiving, we're seeing 55% of those patients in the shockable rhythm in 2016-17 surviving the event, and 35% of them almost discharging home. And that's through that collaborative program between our first responders and our paramedics. The future of EMR. So this has been the topic of conversation for a long time, and there's a lot of different views within certainly the ambulance service, but also within the fire services about what the future of EMR will look like, and we'll continue to work with them on that. I think what is very, very evident, and in fact I know it's true because Karen Smith and her team are doing some work with the first responders, our medical first responders, around high performance CPR and conducting a small trial with them. But that is, it's a no-brainer that high performance CPR and the training of that and the education of that to our firefighters is first and foremost where we're going to continue to expand the program. We're also negotiating to expand the program to another 25 volunteer-only locations across the state, and those locations are chosen on a methodology that our research team have developed, and it gives us the highest location of where cardiac arrests either do occur, have been confirmed as cardiac arrests. And we also do some road network modelling between ambulance and the fire services to see what sort of time reduction we can expect to achieve, leading to shorter defibrillation times. There will be continuing ongoing enhancements within training and qualifications awarded, and that's certainly been the mantra for the last 20 years of that continual improvement. And as always, there's a consideration for expanded EMR skill sets within firefighters, and we spoke earlier in the week about the ease of supraglottic airways, so that may be one area that we head to. We're also looking to, within that high-performance CPR, try and get CPR feedback and within the fire services, and we're having some success in having that achieved. That's it.